I am Barry Blues, 34 years old. Just a corporate guy with mint green skin and a bullet-shaped head that is constantly wound as tight as a guitar string. Lately, when I catch my reflection in the black screen of my monitor, I wish for something kind of ridiculous. I wish this exhausted 34-year-old version of me could step back in time, sit down next to little Barry Blues, and just talk to him. That sweet kid who was forced to be a grown-up before he even had a chance to grow up, constantly carrying the entire emotional weight of everyone around him on his tiny shoulders. Do you ever carry that exact same resentment and exhaustion? Right now, I am depleted, emptied out right down to my core. I am staring at my phone and another text pops up. Instead of opening it, I terrifiedly flip the screen face down on my desk. Instantly, a massive boulder of crushing guilt crushes my chest. I desperately want to run away, but the second I close my eyes, my nervous system blares an alarm just like a jammed office printer that is literally smoking. I am not allowed to rest. Actually, no one is forcing me to be like this, but I force myself, and I have absolutely no idea how to do it any differently. I am craving a total meltdown, but I don't even know how to fall apart. Even in this exact moment, if someone called me for an emergency, I would still drain my last 1% of battery and drag my body out of bed to be their savior. I am resentful. I hate this loop. But I am completely powerless. If you see yourself in this oddly specific scenario, if you've ever wished you could go back and hug your inner child, but right now you are ghosting your own life because your social battery is permanently stuck at 1%, hit that like button so I know we aren't glitching out alone here. Hey, it's Barry and my lukewarm coffee again. Does this sound vaguely traumatic to anyone else? Welcome to Barry Blues, when unstable is the new normal. I ask myself this question all the time. Why do I always feel like I have to carry everyone else's emotional baggage? Why does my coffee cup start shaking from sheer anxiety the exact second I get 10 free minutes of silence? For the longest time, I thought I was just naturally a cold, avoidant person, fiercely hyper-independent, always solving my own problems and refusing any help. At work, I was a productivity-obsessed perfectionist who couldn't stand sitting idle. I helped everyone, so much so that one day, everyone else's job magically became my job. Society loves to praise us for this, right? We get the shiny Employee of the Month award in the giant corporation of life. You might look at your younger coworkers doing bare minimum Mondays and feel a massive spike of anxiety. Not because they are wrong, but because your programming literally forbids you from acting your wage. In relationships, I chose to sacrifice in the dark, silently building the relationship without letting my partner know, until my sacrifices just became the baseline expectation. And the second I stopped to take a breath, suddenly I was the one who changed. And even when it all crashes down, exhausted from endless unpaid overtime, relationships ending in arguments because I simply couldn't carry two human lives on my back. I didn't know who to share it with or who to complain to. Just alone, hugging myself. And worst of all, I couldn't even squeeze out a single tear. Because from a very young age, I wasn't allowed to cry. So I just forgot how. I wish I knew how to sob out loud, to scream that I am really, really not okay. But let's reframe this narrative for a second, because you are not actually a cold person, and you certainly aren't broken. You might just be experiencing the crushing weight of having given too much of yourself away for far too long. This behavior is usually a sign of deep, systemic emotional exhaustion. You aren't avoiding people because you don't care about them. You are avoiding them because you have been functioning as the emotional Wi-Fi router for everyone in your life since you were a kid, and your bandwidth is completely maxed out. What feels like laziness or apathy is actually an emergency protocol. Your system is shutting down non-essential functions just to protect the mainframe from catching fire. You are exhausted because mimicking normalcy and pretending you have everything under perfect control burns significantly more energy than actual physical labor. So please, take a breath and let go of that guilt. You are not a bad friend for leaving that text on read. Your brain is just desperately trying to force a reboot. To really understand why our internal servers are constantly crashing, we have to look at the backend code. In the realm of psychology, there is a clinical concept known as parentification, though it frequently pops up online under terms like eldest daughter syndrome or being the glass child of the family. But because I prefer to think of my brain as a very tired, slightly outdated office computer, let's look at it this way. Imagine you were hired as a junior intern. You are just a kid, you have no real-world experience, and you are simply there to learn how to play and grow. But on day one of the internship, the CEO is either missing, emotionally unavailable, or constantly setting the break room on fire. The management structure collapses, and suddenly, the entire company relies on you. You become the crisis manager. You become the emotional thermostat of the entire household. You walk into a room, and immediately your brain starts running a heavy, silent antivirus scan. You are reading the room, analyzing micro-expressions, listening to the tone of footsteps down the hall, trying to predict the next meltdown. If your parents were stressed, you ran the background app to fix it. If there was conflict, you became the invisible mediator. You learned very early on that your existence in this family company was only validated if you were useful and low maintenance. Love, for you, became a highly conditional transaction. You were constantly praised for being so mature for your age, told that you were such an old soul. But being mature for your age usually just means your childhood was uninstalled without your permission. You had to grow up fast because the adults in your workspace simply didn't. And here is exactly where the massive system error happens. You eventually grew up and left that toxic office environment. But your nervous system never got the memo that the internship is actually over. It is still running that obsolete survival software in the background every single day, eating up all your emotional RAM. That is why resting feels so incredibly dangerous to you now. When you finally stop moving, when you try to just sit on the couch and exist, the silence doesn't feel peaceful to you. It feels like a trap. Your brain thinks that if nobody is yelling and nothing is currently on fire, it means a catastrophic system failure is imminent, and you just aren't seeing it yet. You have productivity paranoia hardwired directly into your motherboard. You feel guilty for resting because in your childhood blueprint, stopping meant dropping the ball, and dropping the ball meant you were no longer safe. This is why you might find yourself constantly attracting energy vampires or people who desperately need fixing. Your brain recognizes their chaos. It looks at a completely toxic relationship and says, "Hey, a broken printer. I know exactly how to manage this mess." Meanwhile, healthy, stable, and peaceful people feel incredibly boring or highly suspicious to you, because your operating system simply doesn't know how to process peace. Your nervous system is perpetually stuck in a state of hypervigilance, and when it finally realizes it can't fight or flee, it chooses the only other option, a complete system crash. You disconnect. You isolate yourself in the bathroom at work. You sleep for 12 hours, but wake up exhausted. And you feel like you are looking at your own life from behind a thick pane of glass. So, how do we force quit this exhausting program without completely wiping our own hard drives? You can't just flip a switch and suddenly become someone who doesn't care about others. And honestly, you shouldn't. Your empathy and your hyper-awareness are incredible tools. They are just currently being managed by a terrible boss. We need to start with something small, something that doesn't trigger a total system panic. In psychology, they often talk about shadow work, but in our office, let's call it checking the quarantined files. All those emotions you weren't allowed to have as a kid, the anger at being neglected, the sadness of being lonely, the frustration of doing the heavy lifting. You zipped them up in a folder and hid them deep in the hard drive because they were labeled as corrupted or dangerous by the adults around you. But those files don't just magically disappear. They run secretly, draining your battery, causing your system to overheat. You have to eventually open those folders. You have to look at the anger and the sadness and realize they aren't malware. They are just parts of you that desperately needed a safe network to upload to. You need to start setting boundaries, which I know sounds terrifying because your brain equates boundaries with getting fired from the company of human connection. But think of a boundary as simply putting your emotional status on Do Not Disturb for a few hours. You have to start reparenting that inner child of yours. You have to step up and become the IT support for the younger version of you that was left alone in the dark server room. When you feel that familiar, overwhelming urge to jump in and fix someone else's problem at the expense of your own sanity, take a long breath, look at your shaking coffee cup, and remind yourself that you are not on the clock anymore. You do not have to earn your right to exist by being endlessly useful to everyone around you. You are actually allowed to be a little useless sometimes. You are allowed to let that metaphorical printer jam, look at it, and just walk away. Healing isn't about downloading an entirely new personality or becoming this perfectly optimized machine. It is simply about logging out of the heavy roles you were forced to play as a kid and finally remembering who you were before the world told you who you had to be. It might feel profoundly weird at first. You might feel a little empty or aimless when you aren't carrying the weight of the entire world on your shoulders. But that emptiness is not an endless black hole. It is just free storage space. And for the first time in your life, you finally get to decide what you want to fill it with. Be gentle with yourself during this process. If you are struggling to reply to texts, or if you need to hide in the break room for 10 minutes just to regulate your breathing, that is perfectly okay. You are unlearning decades of intense survival programming, and that takes time. Give yourself some grace. Protect your peace as your highest priority, and maybe, just maybe, let someone else figure out how to change the toner cartridge for once. Now, I know your brain just opened a brand new tab. You are thinking, but Barry, if all of us kids who were forced to grow up early suddenly heal, retreat, and stop carrying the weight, how is this entire societal server going to restructure itself? Let me stop you right there. If, in this exact moment, you are still sitting there worrying about restructuring the entire social ecosystem just because you decided to prioritize yourself, that is proof that your inner child hasn't really escaped yet. That is just your old survival programming trying to invent a macro crisis for you to manage because peace absolutely terrifies it. Trust me, this social network will keep running. It will have buggy updates, it will get better in some ways, and it will get worse in others, just like it always has. But the truth is, when you start valuing and loving yourself more, you are definitely getting better. And when more individual nodes in the network get better, the entire social system naturally evolves and upgrades. So please, put down the responsibility of saving the world. So turns out I'm not crazy, my brain is just running on Windows 95. See you in the next spiral.